Coming up on The Returned.
I noticed above me were white orbs, very beautiful, semi-transparent, kind of exquisite orbs. I felt was how pure they were. They were angels, and they invited me to look back to the earth. Then they said to me,
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, we sit with Shanti George, a spiritual experiencer and guide who has journeyed beyond the veil through lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences, and profound encounters with the unseen. Shanti, welcome to The Returned.
"Hi, MJ. Thank you for having me on the podcast."
You're so very welcome. Shanti, before we get into the heart of the conversation, I always like to ground the audience in who you were before your experiences, and also, did religion or spirituality play a role in your life or your upbringing?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a very conventional family, so we weren't religious. It was a very normal family. I went to a regular school, and there was no emphasis on spirituality or anything. I was interested in things as a teenager. I remember I got a book once on astral projection, so I had that sort of curious, open mind. But really, I was just very adventurous as a young person, and I started traveling the world very young. In my travels, I started to meet a lot of sannyasins, which is the term for Osho's disciples. I don't know if you've heard of Osho. He was an Eastern mystic, also known as Bhagwan. So I was meeting his sannyasins. So that, I was a little bit interested in meditation in my 20s. But what happened for me, like the turning point, I was traveling a lot. And then at one point I was back in England, which is where I am now again. I was flat sitting for one of my sannyasin friends. And while I was there, he had a lot of material on Osho's teaching. So that was when I first really started to look at these teachings. And one day I listened to a discourse where he was talking about becoming a sannyasin, and it was just a really beautiful, what he was talking about, what it meant. And I just completely melted, and I thought, that's it, I'm going to India, I'm going to become a sannyasin. So that was, I went to India for 6 months. I was 28, and I just got right into meditation and spirituality big time. Like, that was a big turning point for me at that point.
That sounds like you had a lot of traveling and a lot of wisdom, and you gained a lot of knowledge. So as that began to unfold, you already mentioned that there was a shift. Were there moments that couldn't be explained?
I would say, for me, what was happening when I first started meditating, and as I said, I was there for 6 months that time, and I was deep diving. So I was meditating sometimes 3 times a day. I was doing longer silent retreats. And there were aspects of this kind of inner world that felt familiar, but it really was the start of my journey. It wasn't like what happened for me after that, going into my 30s and even my 40s. I really was the quintessential spiritual seeker. So I was spending time with different teachers and going on a lot of different spiritual retreats. That was my favorite thing, just to take time out. And that was when I started having much deeper experiences. So on a retreat, sometimes I would be in a much more sort of expanded state than, and the difference between what I was able to be in on these retreats and what I would sort of slowly return to in my life, that became like two worlds for me, and I really wanted to integrate. So that was that became a thing. But even like during all of that time, I was having unusual experiences, but it took me many years to really understand. Like my early OBEs, for example, I would regularly just wake up way above my house. Like I would just be shooting up, and then I would sort of gain consciousness and almost like as a person in the air, sort of freak out and start falling, and then I'd wake myself up, like those sorts of things. I didn't even know what an OBE was. So I did have a lot of unusual experiences like that. But what happened for me as well, MJ, is that about 15 years ago, I stopped being able to sleep properly at night. So I started doing a very meditative sort of thing at night, but I called it night traveling because what I was learning by then was how to move as awareness through the different levels of form and sort of enter cosmic states. Not that I would have amazing experiences every night, but over time, I really did have a lot of very cosmic experiences, which really remind me a lot of NDEs. When I listen to NDEs, it's very similar. And I developed this technique, which I called golden nuggets, which was to sort of condense the knowledge that I gained out there, and I would sort of bring it back in nugget form and then unpack it. So that's been part of my journey. And also just developing abilities, like being able to communicate with my loved ones after they've passed. And in fact, when I listened to one of your podcasts where you were talking about how your mom communicates to you with songs, my mom does, too. So I could maybe share some of that.
Sure. I would love to hear some of the experiences that you had that pulled you beyond physical, maybe into something deeper. And then as that, we can move into the others later. How does that sound?
Yeah, sure. I can share some
Hmm.
of the deeper ones. So, the challenge with sharing the really deeper ones, I guess because our language is so limited, that's part of the problem. And but anyway, I know that people who watch shows like this, we're pretty open, so I've just got to get used to sharing because I know to share this. I know to share this knowledge. So, okay, so there was one, for example, where I entered an extremely peaceful state. So usually when I have these experiences, I'm out in the cosmos. So that's kind of always the setting, is just the cosmos. And I entered this extremely core sort of peace. But what happened in this particular experience was I was like the center of a hurricane, and what was moving around me, swirling around me, what I saw, it looked like a gray mass, like a ring, and it was made of these really tiny looked almost like little strings. And what I was knowing as I watched this gray swirling mass was that these little strings were thoughts, and particularly illusory thoughts. And what I was knowing in this state was the nature of thought and how you just buy into one of these little thoughts, and because of I don't even know what it was really, but I knew that it would take me and you could just get lost into that illusory mass. Like seeing it like that was a very different perspective, that it had a real mass, it had a form. And what I was in was just this completely other, again, I guess it's like what people experience with an NDE. You're just separate from anything like that. You're very separate. You're just peace. So that's the sort of really profound experience that I would then allow to change my perspective. start to realize these things from these altered states, and therefore, for example, become a lot more aware of my thoughts and even more responsible, seeing and knowing the illusory nature of so much of our thinking.
In any of your experiences, your profound experiences, have you ever come across any type of beings or light?
Yes. So one of the most beautiful and the most profound happened again in the night. Very deep state. Took an hour or two probably to get into this very, very, very deep state. And what happens for me in that as well is that it's just about letting go. It's almost the opposite of what we do ordinarily in the world to sort of get something or get an experience. We sort of use effort. This is almost the opposite, in that I am just relaxing extremely deeply and letting go and letting go and letting go. That's sort of the essence of what I'm doing. And then I will start, not always, but sometimes I can enter something, and then I will have the seeing and the knowing, but not always. So this is one of those ones where I did. And in this very peaceful state, I mean, I was just kind of blissed out in this love and this peace, all beyond. And then I noticed above me were white orbs, very beautiful, semi-transparent, kind of exquisite orbs. And what I knew when I looked at them was what I felt was how pure they were. This purity was very moving to me. And then there was a word amongst them. The word was invitation. And I telepathically said, I don't know how to move like that. And as soon as I said that, I had the knowing that I could let go just the tiniest bit more. And somehow I let go just a tiny bit more. And then I started floating up, and I was one with these orbs, and they were angelic in nature. They were angels. And they invited me to look back to the earth. And when I looked back to the earth, I could see that it had a darkness around it, a dimness. And what came to me was that it was because of all the fighting. And I was thinking it was the wars, why it looked dim like that. And it was sad. It was a sad thing to see and feel that. I mean, I don't normally even look, when I go out there, I don't actually like to look back at all. A bit like people with an NDE, right? You just want to be where you are in the peace. And so seeing that darkness and knowing that it was because of the fighting, but then they said to me, how do you fight? And that was a really poignant, that really impacted me, because it was, the knowledge was I needed to stop fighting, and that the darkness wasn't just because of the wars. It's fighting energy that any of us have. How different those realms are, which is so full of peace and love. So different to the earth, and yet we're able to let go of our fighting. So we can't stop the wars, but we can become peaceful and not have a fighting energy towards others.
Interesting. And so when you would be in that altered state and when you were one with the orbs, the angels, how did you see anything else? Or did you just come back after that knowing?
In that particular experience, that was that. But I mean, it wasn't sort of a quick thing. So normally what happens if I enter into these much deeper states, I do spend some time. It can be, it's hard to know, but it feels like here it's at least half an hour or sometimes more, where I'm literally just blissing out in this peace. So because I mean, fundamentally, that's what it's about. These deeper states are really just kind of like receiving information that is frequency based and bringing that. So often, like I talked about those golden nuggets, the golden nuggets were often very simple, just key words like relaxation. So that in my life, I could just, as often as I could, remember to just relax, letting go. And knowing is a very key word, because there's always a subtle knowing that is beneath our everyday way of being. So, but that was that one. I could tell you another. So another very profound one that happened many years ago. Now I'm trying to think when. It could have been around 2015, somewhere around there. So what happened was I just spontaneously dropped into this space. I was on a retreat at the time, and this happened during the day, which is more unusual. But what I saw was a wave. So again, it was seeing the cosmos, and this wave that was just as big as you could possibly imagine. It was just endless wave, and the wave looked like it was made of stars because it was invisible. But the seeing was like there was this wave, and it had been pulsed out from source like a heartbeat. That was what I like. And then this wave, and the purity of the love that I was knowing as I saw that, like it made me weep at the time. It was this pure love, and I knew the purpose of it was transformational, that this pure love wave was going to sweep through everything in the multiverse and would, like, it was unstoppable and it was powerful. Like, it made me cry with how pure it was. And I just knew that that would change everything. And ever since then, I've been waiting. I'm like, when's it coming? But I actually feel like in a way, it's been coming for some years now as a frequency. Yeah.
I think I agree with that as well. Have you ever, so on your out of body travels, have you came across loved ones or other types of beings as well? And are your out of body travels while you're deep in meditation?
So the OBEs that I've had are a lot more rare. The night traveling, where I'm moving more as awareness into these cosmic states, they're much more common for me. But I'll tell you an interesting OBE. So this happened, again, I don't know when, it was more than 10 years ago. And I woke up in this other body, and I was horizontal, and I was moving through my bedroom wall. And as I was moving horizontally, feet first, through my bedroom wall, I was very conscious. I was very aware what was happening. And by then I'd had enough experiences that I was, relatively calm, and I was interested in what was occurring, because I'm like, how do I go through a wall? Because I felt very solid. I felt like I had a form. And I actually put my hand on my thigh. And I'm like, yep, like it was like slapping my thigh. It was, I was solid, and yet I could see the texture of the wall. So it was very unusual. But then what happened wasn't so good, because I went through the wall, and on the other side of the wall, there were some negative entities, and they kind of played with my form, like they were spinning me, and I got really dizzy, and it made me feel it was unpleasant, and it woke me up. So, I mean, there are negative beings and usually what happens when I'm going to deeper states beyond, I feel them more. I just call it interference. So I try not to focus on them at all. So I start moving in this beautiful way, which is about relaxation and peace and love and knowing. And then something horrible will come in. And what I learned to do was just focus even more on softening. So it was the opposite of kind of reacting or being interested. I would just go into deeper love, basically, because they can't follow energetically. And that's how I always navigated as awareness. But that was an unusual one because I was closer to the earth plane. Like my OBEs, like I've had other ones where I'm just up on the ceiling, which I think is a fairly common one for people who've had OBEs, where I'm just up on the ceiling. So those are what I call an OBE, where I'm much closer to the earth plane in a way. I'm usually in my bedroom or something like that. I did have one, it was a couple of years, or was it a couple of years after my mum passed? It wasn't that long after she had passed. And I was shooting up through the air, and the wind, like, it sounds so funny, but it's so physical. Like, the wind was loud. That's kind of why I became aware of the wind rushing past my ears. And I was yelling to my mom. I knew I was going to see my mom, and I was so excited. But what actually brought me out of it, unfortunately, was the version of me still in my bed started making this murmuring sound, like it was disquieted, almost as if it knew part of it wasn't there and it wasn't happy. And it was that brought me back.
I had, when I think about when you just said that, uh, I just recently had a very interesting experience, but I was dreaming. However, when I dream, my dreams are very, very lucid. Like it's like very, very real. And I was in my mother's kitchen, and my stepdad was there, and he had passed a year before. And then I was talking to him, and then I heard something behind me. So I looked, and it was my mother. And I just spun around and I looked at her and I said, "You made me think you were dead for 2 months." And then I hit the floor, and I don't even know, like, I just dropped to the floor. But it was really interesting because what I think happened was I dropped in frequency.
Oh,
Because what ended up happening was I started to be kind of surrounded in more like a dark space. And I was looking up at my stepdad, and it was kind of like darkness around right here. But I was like looking up at him like this. It was really interesting. And then I was dropping, and the more I dropped, the hurt, the pain, it was almost unbearable. I don't know where I was. I just know that I was like in this in between space from where I was with them to before I got back to myself. And it was absolutely horrific pain. And I was screaming and crying and wailing. And I was actually doing that in my real sleep.
mm.
But it was really painful, and I just finally when I woke up, I sat straight up, and I just was wow. I was very upset. But, what brought that thought to me was what you said there, and I think that when you drop like that, you're dropping in a frequency, and that love frequency can't be, or sorry, I should say it backwards. My emotional state couldn't hold in that place where they are.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I thought about it like.
yeah. I mean, I'm no expert at all of
Mhm.
this. I can only share the experiences that I've had, but I definitely have the impression that the astral realm, or that place where we often go with dreams, um, it can be a bit of a playground for entities. And I even think they can set things up to make you upset in a dream. And in a way, I think it feeds them much like it feeds them in this realm, because it really is
Y
so much about frequency. And that's been really clear to me. But I think sometimes your body, your physical body, is in such a deep sleep state. I mean, what I'm trying to say is you can't blame yourself if you get sort of hoodwinked into a scenario, because it's happened to me a lot. Um, in the past as well. So
Yeah, there's
it's
a
just,
lot of evil too out there that can get to us.
it's not as like what I know when I go to the beyond, the more, the deeper levels take you into the higher realms. And the higher the frequency, the more pure love there is. They just cannot go there. They cannot go there. So it's really about us just learning to continually give nothing to that side of things. Just give it nothing and always return to this way of being that's soft, calm, loving, because that's the way to, if you like, take control. And you just become about something very else. They won't be able to go there when you go into real love. They cannot.
Absolutely, I agree. And how often do you think that you have these experiences?
So to this day, I still travel at night. Oftentimes it is just about going into a very deeply peaceful state. I don't always experience profound things or have visions or seeings or deep knowings. But when I do, that's when I'll sort of condense it into a little nugget and bring it back to sort of help me in my life. Because I'm still awake for hours every night. So that's just become, and it's lovely because the world all around is a lot more peaceful and quiet. It's actually a really special time to do that.
You know, it makes me wonder, like, and actually, what it makes me think about is that, you know, you didn't have a near death experience that caused this to come on. This came on naturally. So, what it says to me is that anybody can actually have these types of experiences if they choose to.
Yes, and to that, I think it really comes down to sincerity, a deep willingness to know the truth, basically, rather than just want to have an experience. Because it is very scientific. There is a way to move as awareness deeper than the personality and the self to our heart, which is a very simple, soft, gentle, warm, lovely space. But then there are the levels of the cosmic being that go through that. So it's something that can be learned, definitely. And I also feel that it's not something that can be grabbed, or it's almost like there's scientific mathematical equations that will preclude you if you're not, I don't even know what the word is, but it's like you have to be a match. You have to, like for me, it's mostly about letting go and disappearing and being nothing. And I'm really happy to be nothing. I actually love being nothing because it's so freeing. It's so relaxing. But then when experiences come, yeah, it is beautiful to receive higher knowledge because it changes your perspective and you realize you are a multidimensional being. Like I've seen another really big one, again, not a long lasting or anything, but clear and life changing, was that I am an inextinguishable spark of God. And every word in that sentence is true. Like it carries a weight. It's not just words that you can believe to make you feel better. When you go to these different realms, you have knowing, like an NDE person does, you know, and it's more real than this world. And that can help you in your life to lighten up even as a person, you know, to see when you have this higher perspective, you see it is a costume drama. I've had past lives. I mean, in some ways it's very complex what's happening when we come into the physical, but ultimately we're all here to evolve together. We're all helping each other in different ways to, yeah. And for sure right now, these days, this awakening that's happening, is really exciting. So even though it seems like the world is darker than ever and crazier than ever, the light is also stronger than ever. And on that note, it's a really good idea to get into the sunshine whenever we can, because they're kind of making that harder. But yeah, there's information even in sunlight that helps to awaken. There's codes.
So interesting. So very interesting. Have you then, now we'll go a little bit back to what you said in the beginning. You said that your mother communicated with music.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So, on the morning after she had passed, I woke up and I just had this song in my head. And very unusually, I found myself singing it aloud. I'm not, that's not the sort of thing I do. I'm singing this song. It's a Joe Cocker song. It's You Are So Beautiful to Me. And I'm just starting my morning routine. I'm in the bathroom. I'm singing this song. And suddenly I just stopped singing and the tears came to my eyes. I knew it was from my mom. It was a message and it just went straight to my heart. And it was so beautiful because in some ways I felt like I'd never gotten that from her in a way and so this was just such a beautiful gift from her. And she was just saying, I love you, I love you just as you are. You're so beautiful. And yeah. And yeah. And then, and you know, there's probably been half a dozen times or so since she passed. So she passed in 2012. So it's not like, it's once or twice a year, maybe. It doesn't happen all the time. But I have come to recognize. So another one, this is kind of quite a fun one. I had been looking for a car and I'd been looking at all these different cars. They were none of them were any good. And it had been about 5 weeks. And that morning I was going to go and look at a little red car, just a little city run around. But I had a good feeling about it. I thought maybe this was it. And I got this song in my head. And it's, I've got a brand new pair of roller skates, and that whole vibe is so happy and sweet. And I knew it was my mom and she was just happy for me. She was almost saying, you're going to get this car. You're going to love it. And I did, it was a great car and I loved it. And what's nice with those kinds of ones as well, it's just, they're not gone from your life completely. Every so often there'll be something like that and they're just checking in. Especially over time, I've really learned to trust it and I love it. And it helps me realize, they really are there. They're right there. They're not in the physical anymore. And sure, we might miss them and everything, but they're right there. And we still have this love connection. And I'll just share one more, quite a recent one. So last year it was my 60th birthday. And in the morning, I came out of the bathroom. I came out of the shower and I'm in my dressing gown and I flicked on my little radio that I'd recently bought on a whim. And I hardly ever play it even now, but that morning, I don't know, I flicked it on. And the very first line of the song that came out of the radio, she wore blue velvet. And it was my mom's era as well. I think it's 50s. That was her era. And again, it was instant as I'm listening to this song. And it's often the melody, it's like, it's the vibe of the song that they're communicating. It can also be the words, but it was, and my dressing gown was a dark blue velvety dressing gown. And it was just, seems very random that it would come through the radio, but I knew that was her. And it was basically just her acknowledging that she saw me on my 60th birthday. And it's a beautiful song as well. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I had my mom does the same with songs. There was a few things that she's done lately, but one song which was in particular because this is just my mom. Like, my mom was 80 and she was getting, her wrinkles were deeper and all this stuff. And she just hated her wrinkles. Like, she's just like, just couldn't handle it getting that older looking skin. And I always thought it looked really beautiful. Like, I really like it when older ladies, I don't know what it is about that. It's like a life really well lived and there's so much character in the face. So personally, I thought it was beautiful. But the song she sent to me was it was called If You See Me. And some of the lyrics, and this would be so her, and I never have heard the song before. And it was if, like, basically you wouldn't recognize me, you'd walk right by me on the street, you know, she'd be smiling just like before she was goodbying. It was just like, okay, mom, wow. And not only that, what happens for me is I wake up hearing it like you left your headphone in. And it's a verse. It's not like a full song. It's like a verse that kind of keeps going over for myself. And then I can hum it. Then I know what I'm humming it. And then magically I figure the words out. And I
Mm.
don't even know how I do it because I didn't know the song. And so then I would go searching, 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 and I found the song. But because it went over and over and over and over and over again, you heard the lyrics. I don't know how to actually explain it, but
No,
my stepdad,
I've had the
pardon?
same. I've had the
Yeah,
same experience. Yeah.
I wonder how they can do that, like it really makes me wonder. Uh, well, one thing I know is I love music. And so she would know how to communicate with me where I would grasp it, right? Because before she passed away, my stepdad passed away and he was sending me songs for my mom.
Mm.
It was incredible because my mom was blocked. Like, she just didn't believe, she was just so sad. On that note, I wanted to ask, uh, and you've been traveling out of bodies, where do you think the other side or heaven or is it here with us, do you think? Do you think it's right there? Do you think it's up there? Do you believe that's in a different realm or dimension? What do you think?
There are definitely other dimensions and higher realms. Um, I can only sort of share my knowledge of what happens to me when I've entered those different states. I don't, I only sort of know what I know in them. For example, when I'm moving into a different dimension, let's say, or a very altered frequency to what's normal, I experience the physical feedback in my body that is electromagnetic. So I get this kind of electromagnetic, um, and then much like someone having an NDE, you know you're in a different place. You see and you know things, and the whole vibe is different. The very air is full of love. It's normal there. That is, and the peace is, and you have instant knowing. And so I know those places exist, and I've been to them, and I know certain things about them, and I have some knowledge of how to access them. Not that I'm an expert in the sense that I can just switch it on, switch it on and off. I can't. A profound experience will happen when it happens. But in terms of, having a specific location, I don't know, and I couldn't say. I think it's a lot more complex in a way. But what I do know is about the frequency, and I do know that we are multidimensional beings. I do know that we are eternal, essentially. We come from God or from source. But I really do have the sense that there are levels beyond. So I don't think everybody, for example, when they pass over, I don't think everybody necessarily goes to the same place. I think it does depend. Even I would say on knowing, because knowing itself is something that can be developed. It's very subtle and it's very easily overlooked. But knowing is sort of part of how I navigate as awareness. I'm attuning to my own knowing. So it's very different to other kinds of learning. But it is still something you can learn and develop. And I think depending on how much you have built in that deeper way, I think that's one of the factors that determines where you go to next. But having said all that, I think one of the most fundamental things to aspire to in this life is simply to come from the heart. It's really, it all comes back to being open-hearted and returning to a state of love. And all of those qualities of forgiveness, letting go, compassion, they become things to live by, things to develop. It's not really about, I had this great experience and I know all this stuff. It's, in fact, the more you know, the more you're responsible to transform your patterns and to transform what isn't in alignment. And having said that, I just want to share one other little story about my mom, because like most people, she didn't have really, I don't think she had much in the way of spiritual understanding. And yet I know how different that is, obviously, for her now. She's not in that old person and self thing. So again, it's quite a few years ago now. It was during a period of retreat for me. I was really intensely working during the day and at night to transform my ancestral patterns. It was really up for me to change as a self. And one night I had a very profound dream. In the dream, all my immediate family were there. So my brother and sister, my mom and dad. But I was seeing it with this elevated kind of spiritual perspective. And I had all this love and compassion for all of us in the family, for all the suffering that we go through as human beings, especially with family dynamics and whatever. And it was just seeing and having all this compassion for my family. And I woke up that morning and there was a line in my head, one sentence. And it's the only time my mom has communicated like this where it wasn't a song, it was just a sentence. These patterns have been running this family for 1,000 years. Very powerful, you know. It's like maybe she was with me in that dream or even helped me to have it. And she was just acknowledging what I was doing and how old these patterns, because I saw at one point as I was doing all this spiritual work to change these patterns, I had the knowing and the seeing, because we all affect everyone, everywhere, forever, MJ, with this.
That's
all
right.
that we're doing, being, thinking, feeling, we might think it's our own private world. No, nothing is. We are affecting all the time, everyone, and it kind of radiates out. So we affect our body, we affect ourselves, and then it goes out. But I saw that it really goes through the lineage. It goes to our ancestors, even after they've passed over. Somehow the work that I'm doing to undo all of this and sort of all that I'm doing to return to being more aligned with peace and love, that is also going to them, which is beautiful.
So, Shanti, how do you personally discern from what is truth versus illusion in your spiritual experiences?
Yes. Yeah, that is a really big one, discernment. And it's one of those things that is developmental. And honestly, the key to it is honesty, deeper honesty. And, I've had different teachers over the years, and sometimes that's been very helpful because we can easily fool ourselves as well. So having, different guides, teachers, healers, having sessions, sometimes I've had to have help to help me see what I haven't been able to see myself. Because it really is a deep, deep level of honesty and a willingness to really see the dark corners, because it is the subconscious that is often running the show. And if we don't make that deep inner inquiry, especially with beliefs, we don't actually need any beliefs. I think the further along you go on this path of evolution, the fewer beliefs you'll have and the more you'll just know. And yeah, it's the discernment is something that definitely develops, but it can be tricky. But having said that, the more profound experiences I've had as awareness where I've traveled beyond, that's also much easier to know. It's very clear. Those deeper spaces, you simply know. It can be really out there and seem really bizarre to your everyday self that that place that you went to really exists, but you know 100%. What's more difficult is to discern, the patterns that we have, the beliefs that we have, the thoughts that we have, even about ourselves, and to be always willing to see where we might be fooling ourselves. Because what we actually know a lot of the time isn't much, but everybody knows the value of being open-hearted and forgiving and having compassion and being kind. And so those things, I think most people know that's worth aspiring to those things.
Absolutely. And so when you take a step back and reflect, why do you feel this experience happened to you? And if I may, how did it change the way you show up in the world today? I should say experiences, by the way, not just one experience.
Yeah. I think we all have a different blueprint. So we all have a different role to play. And I don't know if you're into astrology. I know I find that very fascinating because, for example, in my astrology, I have a bunch in the ninth house, and the ninth house is all about travel and higher learning and spiritual experiences and things. So I do think we have a different blueprint, but, and interestingly, when I was a child, at the time even, I thought it was my imagination, but I would go out into the cosmos. So I wonder if part of it has just been like, I'm just into being a cosmic being, or I don't know, maybe I've had other past lives where I've really been into meditation. So there could be a background to me as a soul or as a being. And there may be part of a mission that, it can feel a little bit cringy to sort of say something like that, because I know that we all have a very valuable role to play. And in essence, it really just is about coming back to love and just being here. It's very difficult, but I have just had this drive for higher knowledge. And I think in the beginning, all of that traveling in the world really was a form of seeking, even though it just took on that form of having lots of adventures. When I did go to India at 28 and I started meditating, I sort of knew that this was what I really this was where I needed to be going. It's not to go out there. So I think in the East, they call it divine discontent. You're more driven, like other people, they don't want it. They're not interested in spirituality, or they're not driven to know the truth of who they really are or what's really going on here. Why is this world so crazy? And, but I just love higher knowledge. It's just very natural to me. And, but I think in the beginning, spirituality is very easily romanticized. And also that whole pitfall around spiritual ego is also a thing, because what I've realized is it is actually really painful often and very difficult and very challenging to transform yourself, because you realize this responsibility. When you do come into knowledge and you do start seeing the bigger picture, it's like, okay, it's not about just having lovely experiences. I can't get angry with people. I can't have mean thoughts about people. I have to walk the talk, Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that fully answered your question.
Yeah, I think it did. Has your relationship with fear changed since you were younger? Like, could you tell us what fear represents to you?
I have seen that it is an illusion. It's one of those things that seems normal in the world, but it belongs to the matrix, and it's not real. It's what is used to control us and keep us small. I think for people, if they have a fear about something, it's like, it's going back to that discernment and that honesty and that being responsible for your thoughts. If you go a little deeper into things, you can often see that you don't have to believe. It's like a sentence. It becomes a sentence in front of you. It's like, what am I believing here? Why am I believing that? Do I need to believe that? Like, how real is that? Because what happens is, if we have a belief, a fearful belief, and we just empower it over and over and over, and it's like we make it real in a sense, because we are creative beings, and we can create our reality in that way. So it can feel real, but it's not, it's not about and yeah, so it becomes having this willingness and this honesty to really discern, to look at what you're believing, look at what you're thinking, start to see that you are separate from that. I mean, I've always been sort of, I go for it, like all the traveling and the crazy things that I've done. So I'm not a particularly fearful person. I have had to work at other things though, particularly worry about things and letting go of what's not in your control. But yeah, it really just comes back to this frequency. And I mean, I take time during the day as well as the night to just, to drop in, to tune in. When things happen and I sort of get hit with something unexpectedly, I don't always respond in a way that I'm proud of afterwards. So it is an ongoing process, to make those changes and to forgive myself, to forgive others, to always pick yourself up after a fall, to keep going. I mean, I really have that warrior spirit. I do. And I think that's worth developing too.
Absolutely. You have integrated a lot of higher knowledge. How do you bring that into your everyday life in a way that actually helps people?
Well, aside from knowing that it's fundamentally my frequency, so whether I'm sitting here talking to you or just on my own or working in my garden, whatever I'm doing, we're all transmitting all the time. So, choosing good things, good thoughts, just on that practical level, looking after myself, all the things that I said before about forgiveness and kindness. And I'm always working to develop that. How you are in yourself is what comes out of you, and it does affect on that frequency level. But I am a journal writer. I don't write necessarily every day, but it's where I would jot down my meaningful dreams or experiences or those golden nuggets. Yeah, so I do use journaling. What happened fairly recently for me, because the thing is, with this kind of knowledge and experiences, and I know a lot of people who've had these kinds of experiences, either through an NDE or some other way, can relate to this. It's usually not something we talk about, because often the people who are closest to us or around us, they're not really interested in that. And it's also a very profound and deeply sort of personal thing. It's just not something you start chatting about to people. So we watch podcasts and channels such as yours, because that's our tribe. I mean, this is where I think the internet is fantastic for these kinds of channels like yours, because especially when you listen to someone and it resonates with you, it's that frequency match, and it can spark something in us. And what happened for me, MJ, about 6 months ago, I had an experience with someone on a channel, and it just deeply moved me. She just deeply moved me in how she shared her experiences. And it just triggered something in me, where I realized it's time for me to share my experiences. It's just time. And so I wrote a book. It's called Tales of the Magical Beyond. And at the time of writing the book, it's kind of a spiritual memoir. So it's mostly my experiences, as well as sort of tips almost on how to get there, things that we've talked about today. And then I knew that I would also be coming on shows like yours. And it's like you have to move past that part of you that's scared to do that, or because if you know to share, because it all comes from spirit, really. And this is a very powerful time. And it's like, okay, you have experiences worth sharing. So this is really a big, to answer your question, this is the biggest thing that I've done to really share. And it just comes from this knowing to share. And I have done one other podcast so far. Yours is only the second one. And I got this beautiful email from this woman who watched this other podcast. It really touched my heart what she said. And it's like, I wrote back to her, I'm like, you've made my day, because that's what it's all for, We're all here to wake each other up and talk about these kinds of things, talk about love, talk about peace, talk about how we can help each other come together and be who and what we really are, even in a world that is doing its best to not allow that. It's game over, like we're doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I answered the call, and one of the first things I had to do, which I felt really internally, is tell my story. That was what I had was called, it was starting with me. Right? So what I enjoy about it is I'm not a guru, teacher, medium, anything like that. I'm just a person that has had experiences, and I can relate to others through their experiences, right? And so I feel that I'm part of the team. I'm a returned as well, right? I'm part of the team, and every day I also get a front row seat to learn from people like yourself,
Yeah.
and an understanding.
We're walking each other home, it's like we're sort of doing this, okay, now this person's helping me go higher. Oh, there's something over there that's helping me. And it's like, oh, yeah, we're all just helping each other. And we really are ascending. And that's what a time to be alive.
I always say that because I think that, when the call came in for me, like, I think you understand, it comes very clearly. It just comes in, and you're just like, what? Like, and it's almost like things like, for instance, this podcast, like, what, I'm going to put my life out there. And it was just something that actually scared the heck out of me. I'll be honest. And I never saw myself ever doing in this lifetime.
No,
But apparently someone had different plans for me, or maybe I had different plans for me. So I find this very interesting. And now I can actually say that this is probably the most fulfilled I've felt in my life.
I know.
And
Yeah,
it's a really good feeling. I like to bring different conversations. Not everybody's going to like every conversation. So what my whole thing is, you take what resonates and you leave the rest
exactly.
with every conversation, and discern with everything, you
Yes.
know? Yeah, it's interesting life we're living, and it's I've learned, and I really do believe that this is the greatest time to be alive right now.
It really is, MJ. And, when we step beyond our comfort zone, I mean, after the first podcast that I did, I felt like a different person afterwards. It sort of unlocked this part of me. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about life. When we make those brave choices, especially when it comes to what we're doing, shining our light in this, difficult, dark place where it feels almost like, I don't know. It is almost like a war or but when, like you said, if you know, you know. And so it's not about you. It's not about you and what you want and what's comfortable for you. And, you just step forward.
Shanti, if people feel called to connect with you, do you have any services, published works, or sorry, offerings or published works? And where can they find you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, MJ. I do have a website, which is my name. So www.shantigeorge.com. And if people want to email me, that would be awesome. My email is shantigeorge11@gmail.com. So SHANTIGEORGE 11@gmail.com. And I have just finished my book, Tales of the Magical Beyond. It's literally just, I think, one day it's been available on Amazon. So can you see that? That's what it looks like. And you can get that on Amazon. And as I said, I do the soul energy portraits. So the soul energy portraits, like if you're interested in that, it's on my website. And I also do offer online sessions. And my sessions are very specifically to help people go within, because a lot of people who are interested, but maybe they find meditation just difficult or something. So the sessions are very tailor-made to the person, and we can do sort of a bit of a guided meditation. So basically, I'm just able to help them begin to understand how to move in the unseen to their heart and deeper. And then I'm available for ongoing sessions if they need help to integrate that. But that's all on my website as well.
Okay, and we'll have all that information in the description box below for you. And so, because you're on the return, and here is the return signature question. So, everyone returns with a truth. What truth did you return with that you would want humanity to know right now?
Don't give up. We got this. We're coming into this amazing time. Keep going. Find ways to feed yourself so that you can, keep going. Nurture yourself. It's all about love and just coming out of what we've been in into this new reality.
Thank you. Shanti, I can't thank you enough for being here with us today. There's such a depth in your journey. I don't think that doesn't just speak, but it resonates. And the understanding of how you keep going out and back and returning each time to yourself, carrying more knowledge every single time is something people can not only see, but feel. So thank you for bringing your light and your truth, your awareness here to the return today.
Thank you, MJ. Thank you so much for what you're doing as well. It's wonderful.
You're so welcome. And to the audience, if there is something that you take away from this conversation today, let it be this. The boundaries that we believe are real may not be as solid as they seem. And maybe the question is, or isn't, what happens beyond this life, but how deeply we're willing to experience this one. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.